Hello, Internet, and welcome to my review for Angels of Death, episode 7. When we last left off, Rachel and Zack finished their journey through the third basement, including their final confrontation with Kathy after Zack took the, crazy drug and started trying to murder people. And then they finally got out after an important moment of Rachel declaring herself a sinner as opposed to Zack. And then on the elevator, they have this neat little bonding moment where Rachel starts to reveal a bit of her past to Zack, and then Zack passes out of blood loss because he stabbed himself in the gut earlier in the episode. And that's actually before that. It's a restart this week, a few days ago actually, because we open up on the post-credit scene from last week. Excuse me. And I don't quite remember if I mentioned this last week, but Zack's smile is the purest thing in the world. You have that little bonding moment, and Zack just gives the purest grin I have ever seen. And I know he's a crazy scythe murderer, but it was so sweet. It was just so sweet. Yeah, it was great. But then the episode proper happens, which was not as sweet, just because this is, Angels of Death, and it's rarely sweet. And so, Ray makes the questionable decision, in my opinion, of dragging Zack several, meters through the floor. We see, the huge-ass bloodstain of her, of how far she's dragged him. And I don't quite understand why she doesn't just, drag him and, leave him by the elevator. I get why she's, take him out of the elevator, but I don't quite see why they go, past the elevator. But from there we kind of get what feels like going to be the recurring theme of this arc, and that is Rachel's growing independence. I did criticize the series at the beginning, for Rachel just kind of being a bit of a blank slate and relying on Zack. But as you've seen, especially through the last arc, and definitely more as this arc continues, is that Rachel's becoming very much her own person. And her having to, solo both this floor and, as we find out, all of the previous floors is a great way to really highlight her growing independence. And then we cut to the first of, I believe, 2 smoke-filled, seemingly hallucination scenes. Because my initial impression on the first scene where she's wrapped up in the smoke and all the images are after her, my notes are really vague on that first part, and it's been a while since I watched the episode, so sorry if I'm misremembering things. But I wasn't entirely sure if that was supposed to be a dream, especially because later on, I think that's the second part, when she comes back out of the confessional and realizes that there are a lot of rooms that are just gone. But yeah, I personally think the pink smoke that Grey has is supposed to be hallucinogenic. And that she, all the things she's seeing aren't actually real. Those aren't her parents' ghosts at the end of the second part of that scene. Yeah. But after the smoke clears for the first time, we see that this floor very much has a church theme, which definitely fits with the show's ruminations on God. Rachel is very big on God. She trusts Zack because he swore to God. But it just kind of feels climactic for the second basement. I expect the first basement to be a church, if any of them are a church, because, that's the whole thing is kind of about God. And I don't know, it just seems a little bit weird for that. I'm sure there's some explanation for it. Yeah. But then she enters into the confessional, and the hallucinations come back up again. And there's... Fuck, I barely remember this. I really should have rewatched the episode before I did this, because the whole chanting scene, my notes are super vague. I have the whole blood writing scene definitely adds to the intrigue of Rachel deciding to name herself the sinner last week. which I vaguely remember. I think there's something about God doesn't want the sinner or something. No, that was last week's episode. I forget what it is, but definitely, it adds to that, I'm sure. Um, and then there's the scene that I do remember, where she's like holding this mirror, like a shattered mirror, and it looks like she's about to like injure herself. Was my first thought. Then there's like the picture of her parents, right? And she slashes that, and it just starts bleeding. Um, and then her parents' ghosts pop out. Correct me if the order is wrong or just completely out of nowhere, because it's a really esoteric scene to probably watch again. Um, but like I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I love Rachel's dedication to Zack. Like after she slashes the picture, her parent, or who I'm assuming are her parents' ghosts, like pop out, or at least an image of her parents, even if they're not actually ghosts. Leap out of the picture, and she just slashes them down because she's got to help Zack get that medicine. But really, the whole chanting of like confess your sins, confess your sins. It just feels like the entire world is trying to get the Ray backstory at this point. And, like, I can dig that. Like, I'm trying to get the Ray backstory, too. There's a lot of mysteries there. Yeah. I don't know what to take of Ray right now. Or what to take of, honestly, Rachel's backstory. But yeah, then Rachel cuts through the smoke, and we are finally introduced to the mysterious white-eyed man of the poster, who is Gray the Priest, who is certainly different from really any other floor master that we've seen. All like Zack and Danny and Eddie and Kathy were all these wild, always shouting people, who were just so happy to kill people. And Gray is so calm. Like, all throughout the episode, he's calm. And it's really unsettling. I don't quite know what to take of it yet. But Rachel asks Gray if he is if he is a resident of the floor, the guy who's trying to kill them all the time. And Gray specifically says, from your perspective. And I don't quite know what to make of that yet. Because, what else, who else's perspective is there? Is it like, can the floor masters actually, or, we know the floor masters themselves can't just wander around, but maybe Gray is like a special floor master and he can. So, he's not always on the second basement, but from Rachel's perspective, he is. Because, we know the other ones can't, because when Zack did it, he was declared a sacrifice along with Rachel. Speaking of, what happened with the sacrifice thing? There's some sacrifice going on, and it's not been brought up at all. That was my ADD tangent for the moment. But then, Gray reveals that there is a way to save Zack, to stop the bleeding. But it's not in the church, it's way back on the 5th basement where Danny was. And Rachel asks, how do we get back to Danny's floor? Which is weird. Because it should not be that hard to get back to Danny's floor. It's just walking. Kathy's dead, Eddie's dead, Danny's dead, everyone that could stop her. I mean, sure, we find out there are the zombie prisoners on the 3rd basement, but I doubt Rachel remembers all that. Like, that wasn't exactly an important thing when everything else that happened on the prison floor, happened. The arm grabbed her for a hot sec, probably got left by the wayside. But then she goes out to Zack. So she said. So Gray says, if you want to travel back down to the 5th basement, let me know. But feel free to take your time. Yada yada. And so she goes back to Zack to like, hey, I'm gonna do this thing. And so they have this fight, like, of words. And I can't quite remember how it goes exactly because my memory is shit and I've had a busy fucking weekend. But it's what I loved about it is that it was based on just how much they care about each other. You know, Rachel's like desperate to defend Zack at all times. And I really love that. I've said it before. Rachel and Zack's relationship is the highlight of this show. It's so sweet. But eventually, Zack relents, and Rachel goes. Or first, Rachel tells him to get some rest, which is weird because if you've got a guy bleeding out, if he goes to sleep, he might not wake up, right? Like, that just seems a little bit less than safe. But anyway, meanwhile, during the fight, as I recall, Zack realizes that he does not have the strength to lift his scythe. And so later on, when he accepts that Rachel is going to go down to the fifth basement and get the medicine, he tells her to make a stop on his own floor to pick up a knife from his room. And I'm curious if the knife is just because Zack realizes he's not strong enough to use the scythe, or if there's something more meaningful behind that decision. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how the story shows up. If you have played the game, don't tell me, please. This is an anime-only space. I have not played the game whatsoever. But yeah. Anyway, Rachel goes back to Gray, tells her that she'll go down to the basement and get the medicine. But as they're passing by Zack, Rachel stands in front of him and guard dogs him. Guard dog Zack from Gray. And it's the cutest fucking thing I have ever seen. It is no doubt going to be the thumbnail of this video. It's just so adorable. Wow. I love Rachel so much. She is so cute. She's standing growling at Gray. And Gray's like, wow, you're super protective of him. And yeah, she is. But then we find out. So then they head back down to Kathy's floor. And we find out how this series is going to continue for another 9 episodes, given they're almost out of the building. And that is that Gray is giving Rachel a test on each of the previous floors before he'll let her go back down to the floor below. Which does kind of worry me, because the Zack and Rachel banter and relationship is really the heart of this show. And so getting rid of that for any length of time is kind of questionable. But you know what? I'll see where we go. But then Gray does reveal that he's the one behind the pink smoke when he lets loose some pink smoke at the third basement, which makes me wonder what, if anything, we can really trust about what happens on any of these floors. Because, if Gray has hallucinatory powers, he could make her think anything. So yeah, I'm really excited to see where we go with that. What is real, what is not real, that'll be a fun mystery to figure out as the arc continues. But after that, we get zombies. Which might not be hallucinations, because if zombies just popped up with no forewarning, I would have been like, yep, that's more Gray's smoke magic. But we did have back in, I want to say episode 4 or maybe 5, a seemingly zombie-like prisoner grabbed Rachel by the ankle, if you'll recall. So I'm not entirely sure if these zombies are hallucinations. But either way, Rachel just runs off to Kathy's main room, gets on the mini turret thing she had set up, and just guns them down. And that's not the test, I should add. I forgot to bring up. The test is bringing power back to the elevator or something. But we've seen again and again, she has this odd callousness to her. Earlier on in this episode and in the last, she pulls out the gun that killed Kathy and then kills a couple zombies before she gets away. There is, of course, as I love to bring up, the stitching together the bird in episode 1. There's just a lot of... There's gotta be more than Rachel than she saw a guy die. There has to be. Yeah. That's kind of where the episode ends, as I recall. Rachel is just gunned down with the zombies, but she's still on Kathy's floor, trying to get down to the 5th basement and the 6th basement for a little bit. As we move into, there is still another floor, even if, going by the poster, I don't know who else, if you look at the key visual, everyone's already been revealed, right? Everyone showed up, we know who everyone is, we've met, Eddie and Danny and Kathy and Gray, so I don't know what'll happen on the 1st basement. But I'm looking forward to finding out. But first, we have several floors of new trials to get through as Rachel has to save Zack. So, I hope you all enjoyed this video and the episode. I sure did. And if you did, feel free to drop me a like or subscribe or whatever the fuck you want. I don't really care. And as always, people, kick an ass and I'll see you in the future. Bye.